You've probably noticed how some people move through life with this strange combination of enormous ambition and almost no momentum. They talk about the future like it's a vision they can see clearly, starting a business, writing a book, building something meaningful. But when it comes to the actual work, they stall. Not because they don't care, not because they're incapable. They just don't start. Or they start and stop. Or they think about it endlessly without ever taking the first step. Most people call this laziness. Society tends to treat it like a character flaw, a lack of discipline, willpower, or drive. And if you're someone who lives this way, you've probably internalized that message. You've probably told yourself the same thing, that you're not trying hard enough, that you're wasting potential, that something is fundamentally wrong with you because the gap between what you want and what you do feels impossibly wide. But what if the story you've been told about yourself isn't actually true? What we're really talking about here is the psychology of people who are what others call lazy, but who dream intensely. And there's far more going on beneath the surface than most people realize. Let's start with what's happening in the brain. Research in motivational neuroscience shows that our drive to act isn't just about wanting something. It's about whether our brain believes the effort is worth the reward. This calculation happens largely in the ventral striatum and the prefrontal cortex, regions responsible for evaluating effort versus outcome. For some people, this system is highly sensitive to perceived futility. If the brain anticipates that success is uncertain, distant, or requires prolonged discomfort, it essentially says, "Don't bother." This isn't laziness, it's a form of threat detection. Now, here's where it gets more personal. This pattern doesn't just appear randomly. It's often rooted in early experiences, particularly ones where effort didn't lead to reward. Maybe you grew up in an environment where your achievements were ignored, criticized, or met with indifference. Maybe you tried hard at something that mattered to you and it fell apart. Maybe you learned, unconsciously, that the safest thing to do is nothing. Because doing nothing means you can't fail. And more importantly, you can't be disappointed. This creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, a state where the nervous system begins to associate action with pain rather than possibility. It's not that you don't want things. It's that somewhere, deep down, your system has learned that wanting leads to hurt. So it protects you by shutting down the impulse to try. Dreaming becomes safer than doing, because in the dream, you're still in control. You're still capable. You haven't been tested yet, so you haven't been proven wrong. And here's what's important to understand. This isn't a moral failure. It's an adaptive response. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you from perceived harm. The problem is, it's using outdated information. It's running on patterns formed in a context that may no longer apply. But those patterns are still there, quietly influencing every decision you make. Now, different people are wired differently. Some people have nervous systems that thrive on challenge, that get energized by uncertainty. For them, action is regulating. But for others, maybe for you, action feels destabilizing. Rest feels like safety. And there's no hierarchy here. Neither is better, neither is worse. They're just different strategies the body uses to navigate the world. But here's the paradox. The very thing that protects you, this avoidance, this inertia, also traps you. Because while you're safe from failure, you're also safe from growth. You're safe from disappointment, but you're also safe from satisfaction. The dreams stay big because they never get tested. And over time, that gap between who you are and who you imagine you could be doesn't shrink, it widens. And that widening becomes its own kind of suffering. There's also something else happening here that rarely gets talked about. Dreaming big without acting can actually serve a psychological function. It allows you to maintain an identity that feels valuable, without risking that identity in the real world. As long as you're someone who could do something great, you get to hold on to a version of yourself that feels worthy. The moment you try and fail, that version is threatened. So, in a strange way, not trying becomes a form of self-preservation. It keeps the dream and the identity attached to it intact. But there's a cost to that preservation, and the cost is a quiet, chronic sense of being stuck, of watching time pass, of feeling like you're living in a waiting room for a life that never quite starts. And that feeling, that specific brand of restlessness and shame, is one of the loneliest things a person can experience. Because from the outside, it looks like you're just not trying. But from the inside, it feels like you're drowning in a sea of intention with no idea how to swim. Here's what I want you to hear. If this is you, you're not broken. You're not defective. You're not less than. What you're experiencing is a deeply human response to a nervous system that learned, at some point, that effort equals danger. And that learning didn't happen because you were weak. It happened because you were trying to survive something. The dreams you have, they're real. They matter. And the fact that you haven't acted on them yet doesn't mean you never will. It just means that somewhere along the way, your system decided that safety was more important than movement. And honestly, that makes sense. It's not wrong. It's just expensive. Because the price of that safety is often the life you actually want to live. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be shamed into action. What you need is to understand that the way you're wired isn't a flaw. It's a response. And responses can change. Not through force, not through willpower, but through slowly, carefully teaching your nervous system that action doesn't have to mean pain, that trying doesn't have to end in collapse, that you can take one small step and still be okay. If any of this felt familiar, there's more to explore here, more about how we become who we are and why we do the things we do or don't do. And maybe, in understanding that, something shifts. Not all at once, but enough.